Paladins are really big on promises. Making them, keeping them, breaking them sometimes. Let's talk about Paladins. Hey fellow Game Masters, I'm Richard Quiner and welcome back to the RPG Daily, your daily dose of all things tabletop role-playing games, helping you build your world and master your game. Today we're starting our series on the Paladin. This was the most voted on months ago when I asked which one you wanted to see next. We're going to break down the Paladin class overview in this video, and for the next about 2 weeks we're going to be talking about all the different oaths that a Paladin can make, including the Oathbreaker and the Unearthed Arcana oath that is out there. So as always, share your thoughts on the Paladin in the comments. Let's have a discussion and see if we can really understand this class. So what is a Paladin? We know they're elite warriors. They're often looked at as holy warriors. They're the quintessential knight in shining armor carrying a shield. But what makes them that in the Dungeons & Dragons sense? It's mainly the oath that they take to fight evil. When you look at most Dungeons & Dragons classes and characters, they're all good. Everyone's good, even if they're chaotic neutral or evil somehow. They're good. They're heroes. A Paladin, though, by definition, is supposed to be good. They are supposed to have some sort of oath that lets them, or that encourages them to thwart evil at every chance they get. To help them accomplish that, they've also trained in martial combat, so they are expert combatants, as well as learning a limited pool of spells that will help them in their endeavors. Paladins follow deities that they make oaths to the deities, which then grants them the abilities to cast their spells and have their auras that we'll go over in a little bit. And adventuring is pretty much second nature to Paladins. It's just part of their oath is to go out into the world and fight the evil. When you start thinking about making a Paladin, it's important to start thinking about what kind of oath you would want to make early on, because that will influence your decisions later on in the actual class mechanics. You want to figure out your goal for your Paladin. What is their epic quest? What are they trying to accomplish in the world? These kind of quests are really good for dungeon masters because it gives them more ideas of how to tie your character into the story and helps you become more invested later on as well. So it's a win-win. So let's get into the basic mechanics behind the Paladin. They are fighters and spellcasters. They're what's called half-casters. They have a limited pool of spells. They only get up to 5th level spells, not super powerful magic. And as a spellcaster combatant, they have an interesting balance between the two that I find kind of fun. Since you'll likely be on the front lines the most, you'll want your strength to be pretty high, followed by your charisma, because your charisma is your spellcasting ability score. So you have a strength and charisma scores. That's what you want to have high. Looking at the hit dice, your hit die is a D10, which is the second highest in the game. The only one higher is the Barbarian. So your pool of health will be pretty good just by being a Paladin. Your starting hit points is going to be 10 plus your Constitution modifier, so it makes sense to keep that a little high. As a Paladin, you have a lot of proficiencies. You're proficient with all armor and shields. You're proficient with simple and martial weapons, so all weapons. This kind of ties into their combat training and the skills that they've picked up in that training. You have no tool proficiency, but you don't need tools to vanquish evil. Your saving throw proficiencies are going to be wisdom and your charisma. And when it comes to your skill proficiencies, you get to choose between athletics, insight, intimidation, persuasion, medicine, and religion. When looking at starting gear, you have quite a few options as a Paladin. Choice 1 is a martial weapon and a shield versus 2 martial weapons. You also have the option of having 5 javelins or a simple weapon. You get to choose between a priest's pack and an explorer pack. I almost always go explorer pack, they just seem more useful. You are given chainmail armor, which is probably the best you can do at that low level. I will remind you, though, that chainmail imposes disadvantage on stealth checks, so be very careful, you will not be sneaky. And last, you get a holy symbol. As we start talking about all the features and the, quote, swag of the Paladins, you're going to see that they do have this interesting balance between spellcasting and combat. At level 1, the Paladin has their Divine Sense, which lets them feel or sense good and evil around them. It's a powerful ability, but it does have its limits that you need to keep in mind. So as an action, you can open up your Divine Sense, and you can sense any creature within 60 feet of you who is good or evil. Good and evil creatures being defined as any celestials, fiends, or undead. This Divine Sense is active until your next turn in a combat situation, or for 6 seconds. When you sense creatures that fit that criteria, you do know where they are and you know what type of creature, celestial, fiend, or undead, but you don't know any specifics. Like if you were to sense a vampire, you would know it's an undead, but you wouldn't know what undead it is, just by your divine sense. This sense can also find consecrated and desecrated places or objects in the world, and you can use this divine sense the number of times equal to your constitution modifier plus 1 per day. Additionally, at level 1, you get the ability to lay on hands. This is an innate ability all paladins get to allow them to heal their allies or themselves. This lets you be a viable healer option even without picking a whole bunch of healing spells for your arsenal. How this starts is you have a pool of points that is equal to 5 times your paladin level. So at level 1, your pool is only 5. At level 10, your pool is 50. You can, as an action, touch a creature or yourself and expend some of the points from this pool in order to give them hit points equal to the number you've spent. So if you want to heal, if you have an ally, you touch them, you spend 5 of your healing point pool, and they gain 5 hit points back. This pool of points replenishes after a long rest, but that's not all. In addition to that, you can remove a disease or poison from a creature at the cost of 5 points per disease or poison. So if someone is really poisoned, like multiple poisons or multiple diseases, you would have to spend that 5 points repeatedly in order to remove all the diseases they have. At level 2, the Paladin's training gives them a fighting style. This is a fun part that we see a lot with fighters and other martial classes. The Paladin has a little more limitations on their fighting style choices though. Each fighting style that you choose gives you specific bonuses depending on the combat scenario, and you can pick one at this level. First up is defense. If you are wearing armor, you get a +1 to your armor class. Pretty simple. Next up is dueling. If you are wielding a one-handed weapon and no others, you get a +2 to your damage rolls rolled with that weapon. Next is great weapon fighter, which means you are using a two-handed or versatile weapon with both hands. When you do that, you can re-roll any 1s or 2s from your damage die, but if you do choose to re-roll the 1s or 2s, you have to use the second roll. And next up is the protection fighting style, which if you are wielding a shield and you see an enemy attack an ally who is within 5 feet of you, as your reaction, you may impose disadvantage on that attack, thus protecting your ally, being a protection fighter. Continuing on, also at level 2 is when the Paladin gets their spellcasting abilities. I've done a whole video on the Paladin spellcasting, so go watch that and I don't have to repeat it here. Next at level 2, you get the ability Divine Smite, which lets you add radiant damage into your attacks by summoning your divine spirit. At this low level, when you hit an enemy with a melee attack, you may expend 1 spell slot to deal extra radiant damage. How much extra damage do you deal? Well, that depends on the spell slot you used. At level 1, you deal 2d8 radiant damage extra with your Divine Smite. When you spend higher level spell slots, you can deal extra radiant damage up to 5d8 on your attack. In addition to that, if the creature is a fiend or undead, you can deal an additional 1d8 radiant damage to that creature, making a max total of 68 radiant damage possible with your Divine Smite. At level 3, you have Divine Health. You have so much holy blood coursing through your veins and righteous energy that you are now immune to disease. That's it. Also at level 3 is where the Paladin gets to choose their Sacred Oath. This is when you have to make a choice of the subclass you're going to be playing. I am going to do a whole other video series on every subclass is going to have their own video, so I'm not going to go into depth here on those, but if you just wait the next few days, you'll have them all laid out for you. The important thing to think about here is what is important to your character and how this will influence your playstyle. Like all subclasses, there is an influence in your playstyle by what you choose, so think about what your character would want or what you would want. Another thing at level 3 is Paladins get access to their Oath spells. Similar to Cleric spells or Artificer spells, the Paladin gets several spells that are specific to that oath that they've made. They are always prepared and don't count against the limit of prepared spells that a Paladin can have, and even if they're not normally from the Paladin spell list, they count as Paladin spells for you. Another ability at level 3 is the Channel Divinity. Also similar to the Clerics, the only difference is there is no Channel Divinity ability that it runs across all of the oaths, each oath has their own options, so you'll want to make sure you understand your oath's specific options for your channel divinity. We will talk more about these channel divinities within each oath video. At level 4, you get the Great Ability Score Improvement / Feat level. This happens again at levels 8, 12, 16, and 19. You have the option to increase one ability score by 2 points, 2 ability scores by 1 point, or to choose a feat if your dungeon master is allowing that. At level 5, the Paladin gets an extra attack. This one is a quintessential Paladin, and Fighter and several other classes have this ability. When you choose to use your action to make an attack action, you can make an extra attack with that action. It just gets you more swings in. It's important to remember, though, that this extra attack does not mean an extra action. It just means your one action deals 2 attacks instead of 1. At level 6, the Paladin starts to get their auras. These are special passive abilities that the Paladin can use to boost their allies and themselves in various situations. Level 6, you get the aura of protection, which extends out from the Paladin at 10-foot distance, so any ally within this aura is affected by it. What is the aura of protection bonus? Well, if they have to make a saving throw, they can add an additional bonus to it equal to your charisma modifier. So if your charisma is high, your allies will get to add a higher number to their saving throw. At level 10, you get the aura of courage, which is another bonus for your allies. Anyone within your aura is unable to be frightened because you are so courageous. At level 11, we get an improved Divine Smite, which is kind of cool. Instead of having to spend a spell slot, it's not off the table completely, it's just optional. Instead of having to spend that spell slot, every attack you make can deal an additional 1d8 radiant damage. So that's just an automatic extra 1d8 radiant damage on your attacks. You can choose to spend the spell slots if you want for even more damage boosts. At level 14 is Cleansing Touch, which is similar to Lay on Hands, but a little different. As an action, you can touch a creature or yourself and end a spell effect on that creature. You can do this the number of times equal to your charisma modifier per day. At the end of a long rest, any spent uses are regained. And last, at level 18, you get Aura Improvements. This is a pretty basic boost, but your auras, instead of being 10 feet and all around you, are now 30 feet all around you. So any creature within 30 feet of you benefits from your auras. Let me know what you think of the Paladin. I know this is kind of rushed. This was a bit of a list of things that a Paladin gets, but you get the idea how this can be a potent spellcaster, half-caster, as well as being a very viable melee combatant. I've played with several Paladins in their parties, and as a Paladin, they are a really fun class to play. Come back tomorrow as we dive into the Oaths, and we'll do the whole series on the Oaths. We'll talk about feats that really work well for Paladins, and some cool Paladin spells, and of course, I'll have to make an optimized Paladin build at the end. I've been Richard, thanks for watching.